All right. Welcome back to the Athlete Empowered Podcast. I'm Dr. Drake and Michael Kowalski. I'm really excited about today's episode. Number one, I've got my good friend Jeevers here. And, we go back actually before I even moved to Scottsdale, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Let's do this. Move this way a little bit.
Sure.
Let's do this. So that way they can see you. Stay where you are.
Okay, cool.
How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. I like that too. We're getting used to this guy.
I like to look at myself. So
yeah, he's such a good looking dude. So the big thing is that our podcast is called Athlete Empowered, and it's all about empowerment of the soul, the body, the mind, obviously in performance. And Jeevers and I go way back, and I'm gonna let him talk about himself because I think that it would be doing disjustice to try to introduce you because you're a man of so many talents. But I'll never forget the first time that I was introduced to PRōZE, and it was through Dave Phillips when I was working at TPI with On Base U in California. And he's like, hey, Phil Mixon's using this new gum, and I want you to try it. And the great thing about Dave Phillips and I is that, we always go back and forth all over our biohacking stuff and all the things that can, make you perform better. And I'll never forget, I had a flight across the Atlantic to London, and I had taken it and, shoot it on the way there. And I got to where I was teaching, and I was like so focused, and like my recovery was so great. And so I was always fascinated by it. But then I moved to Scottsdale, and we'll go into that part of the story. Mm-hmm. But I send you so many people on the nutritional side. You've taught me so much from a mentorship side on nutrition, supplementation. Talk a little bit about like who Jeevers is, because you are a man of very many talents. So give us a little bit of your background, because obviously University of Michigan, they just won the national championship.
Yeah, go blue, baby, go blue.
And so tell the audience a little bit about you, who you are, and then we'll talk about your products and all your different things as well.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks, Dr. Drake. This is an honor, and I'm so grateful to be on the podcast and to share this story. But yeah, so I grew up in Michigan, and so I ended up going to the University of Michigan. Got super lucky because when I went to Michigan, I ended up being in the same dorm as a lot of athletes. And one of my best friends is Brian Greasy, who ended up playing for the NFL for many years, 13 years or whatever. And then, but he was just a freshman there as a 4-string quarterback, right? And so went to Michigan, studied a dual degree in biology and biopsychology, because, every Indian either is going to be an engineer or is going to be a doctor. And so I was, my sister is a dentist. And so my mom and dad said, you're going to be the doctor. And so I was like, okay, that's fine. And so I ended up kind of studying that. And then interesting story. So came our senior year, we both graduated, Brian and I, and we were both going to grad school. So I was going to Boston University Med School. He was going to Georgetown, and we decided to take a year off. So we were going to take a year off before we got into grad school. And so I said, all right, well, hey, we can get this grant to do research work. And Michigan was giving out these $2,500, $3,000 grants, not huge grants, but you could basically take this grant and go. We were going to go to South America, okay, right? And he was going to do study in like water sanitation and something, because he was an environmental policy major. And then I was going to do this study with diabetes and obesity because I worked for this endocrinologist. Anyways, long story short, we ended up taking that year off, but his dad, Hall of Fame quarterback, Bob Greasy, he was like, listen, man, you're a senior, you've got one more year. Yes, you're 4-string, but listen, you're never going to get another opportunity to play college football, never another opportunity to be in this environment of team and just the camaraderie and the energy. You can't do that out in the, non-athletic world, if you will, or he felt like it was really difficult to do that. Right. So he says, why don't you just stay, and just see what happens? Well, long story short, he ends up going from a 4-string quarterback to, 1st-string, wins 17 games, goes to the Rose Bowl, becomes the Rose Bowl MVP, and gets drafted in the NFL. But I'm stuck with my year off. And so now I'm like, what am I going to do? My parents are like furious or whatever. So anyways, I ended up getting into another business. And then I it was a technology business, and it ended up going really fairly well for me, and then Brian was actually playing in Denver, and he wanted to start a foundation. And he said, hey, listen, I'm going to start this foundation. I just signed this big contract, and it's going to be a bereavement center. It's going to be a grief and loss center because, he lost his mom when he was 10. And he said, and he had talked about this ever since we were in college. He said, listen, I am going to have a place where other kids can go to deal with grief and loss and be with other kids, because therapists, psychology, they need to be with other kids.
That community is so important.
That community is and individuals that are going through the journey with you, right? And so he said, I'm going to do that. And so I had just sold my company in San Francisco, and he said, why don't you come out here? And so I said, all right. I came out there, living with the starting quarterback of the Denver Broncos. Like, how could you not want to do that? And we would work on the foundation at night when he was out of practice. But during the day, I just like, when I'm watching soap operas, I'm doing all this sort of stuff. And one of his buddies wanted to start a nutritional supplement company for professional athletes. And obviously I got lucky at Michigan, knowing Brian and Tom Brady and Marty Turco and all these other guys that kind of went pro. And I obviously had a passion for the sciences, passion for wellness, making a difference, not necessarily medicine, just the passion for saying, wow, I could actually learn something, or I could do something that could provide an intangible service to someone that could better their life. I was always super passionate about that. I was never really all that passionate about medicine, And so I said, wow, well, maybe I could do that with nutrition. And that's how the journey kind of started. And we started our company originally to sell products exclusively to professional athletes. And so that's how I got to know so many. We ended up building this great company. We had 600 professional athletes taking our products and just learning a lot about, the stresses that they deal with. And they're no different than the rest of us. It's just that they do it on the field, they do it in the training room, they do it all that sort of stuff. But the fundamental principles of what they're dealing with are the fundamental principles of what we're all dealing with. And therefore, like my mentor there says, the same principles that allow you to get out from disease and illness are the same principles that allow you to elevate your performance. It's just that you have to do them at different intensities. And if you don't do them, the consequences are more severe for those individuals that are ill or diseased, right?
Absolutely.
You're doing the same things.
And I think that, when we look at it, sometimes it's like, okay, we want to be a doctor. And then all of a sudden we get, turned into a whole different path. And Hippocrates said that, food is thy medicine, right? And I have this philosophy, Bill Bowerman from Nike, is that, if you have a body, you're an athlete. And I think so often, people get, they're not encouraged to, come to do what we do because they're intimidated. And one thing that, is really inspiring that you've done with me and you do with a lot of our clients is that you make it simple. Because it can be a really daunting task to say, you know what, I want to change my diet. I want to do this. I want to do that. And when you look at the simple foundation of training the nervous system, looking at the biochemistry, and really helping somebody get to that next level, whether it's 1% or we're healing them from disease, that's something that you've specialized in. Talk a little bit about the supplement company and just what you've learned over the years and how your products have been different, because you were really, really focused on making sure everything's clean, everything's checked, everything's double checked. And when you're working with professional athletes, you got to be really careful. But when we're looking at the general population or somebody who is looking to develop their son or daughter into a great athlete or a great human being, what are some of the foundational things that you would recommend?
Yeah, so it's interesting that you talk about those principles. That's why they have the saying, principles there are few, methods there are many, right? And so you really, really have to feel super comfortable, and you must understand the principles of what you're doing. Like I always say, don't so much focus on what you're doing, focus a lot on why you're doing it. And the reason why, if you focus on the why, if you focus on the principles, then if the environment changes, because the environment will change. So when we talk about nutrition, and by the way, this is just generally in life, but if you talk about nutrition, if the foods aren't there, if you are traveling, if your schedule changes, if all of those things change, because you understand the principle of what you were trying to accomplish, you can then change with that environment. And that's what gets people fallen off the wagon, or it takes them off track, is because they get so focused on the what. I've got to eat this at this time. I've got to eat this much. I've got to do. And when you focus so much on that, then you have to build the perfect environment to allow for that to happen. And it's incredibly difficult to build that perfect environment. And then, even when you do build that perfect environment and you do it, and then all of a sudden it changes just a little bit, it's amazing how much your disappointment in yourself, and the fact that you feel that it was such a major issue that this small little thing changed, because you're innately, you just get focused on what went wrong rather than what went right. And so that's why you got to be really careful when you're super structured.
Yeah.
Because just you will then build something, you will build a mentality that if there is any little change, it will become exacerbated. It will become a huge change because you got so invested into the structure. Therefore, you must not get invested into the structure. You must get invested into the principles that allow you to go and create whatever you need to create. So anyways, that was just kind of one thing. But the thing about me that I was very fortunate is that I didn't get into medicine, that I didn't get into naturopathy. I didn't get into all of this real. Do remember what I simply have a undergrad degree in biology and biopsychology, not even in nutrition, not even in it. But what ended up happening was I ended up getting into a community of individuals who were just like me. So then we were forced to kind of learn a lot about these different things. And what was great about that learning is that because I wasn't so focused on one type of academic principle, it allowed me to open myself into so many more. It's like I think of like in your professional, like a PT, like a physical therapist. They're wonderful. They're awesome. They study so much. They study so much in this one particular method. Okay, right? So it's very difficult for them to want to bring in other methods. And so therefore it's difficult for them to even want to believe in those things, because if they do, then they feel that it almost discounts their learning.
Got it.
Okay, right? So same thing here is like, for me, I was like, okay, hey, yeah, let's learn more about like this type of nutrition or this type of plan or these types of ingredients or this type of philosophy. And fortunately, one of the areas where, there's a lot of that openness is in Eastern philosophies.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so me being Indian and, starting to kind of like think about, well, how is Ayurveda, and how that whole way of kind of thinking and dealing with the body and looking at root issues and not caring about symptoms, because symptoms are just manifestations of like root issues. And like I did a internship like in China for a month. And what was interesting in China is that I was with this oncology group, and in Eastern philosophy, when people talk of cancer, they have a total different kind of mindset. Here cancer is like, oh my gosh, this is a death diagnosis. There it's like, oh, okay, oh, awesome, you have cancer, wonderful. Well, finally your body cried out that something was wrong. So we're just using this as a signal for that. So let's get the body back into alignment. Let's getting into a more energetic system. So it almost is like a celebration of finally the body cried out that something was wrong, because you don't worry about your symptom. There's something that is much deeper that is your issue. So because of that, all of my philosophies are saying, okay, whether it's pain, whether it's sleep, whether it's focus, I'm trying to say, what's actually disturbing the ability for the body to do this innate thing. And see, that's the thing, buddy, right? Is that like when people have these sort of issues, they actually think that there's something wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with them.
No, not at all.
There's just simply
A limitation.
a limitation that through whatever they've created or they've been exposed to, and now that limitation has not allowed the body to do something that it innately wants to do. Okay,
Yeah.
right? And so that's why you so much focus on the root issues, because oftentimes the hindrance, the block is in those areas. That makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of our foundational concepts here, right? Is that we care about efficiency. And whether that's biochemical, whether that's your soul, whether that's spiritual, whether that's physical, we've got to have efficiency in the body so that way we can perform at our best and be able to do what we need to do. And, a couple things I want to go back to that you said is that, I think so often we get stuck on titles or we get stuck on like our role. And, I always tell people, I'm like, okay, it's good that if you don't want to use that, build a team around you that you can refer with. And it's something that we've done a really good job at.
Yeah.
And we have teams here and all around the world now. But what I really think is amazing is that when you really start to dive into, and I'm the opposite of that, right? Like I've been talking to you about helping me. When I was training for my Ironman, I wasn't eating at all, right? I just gotten over a really dark time in my life. I was depressed. I was going through all these things. And you're like, just start small. You know what I mean? Just try this. And don't beat yourself up if you miss the meal, or don't beat yourself up if you do this. Instead, celebrate where you're at and how you're growing. And now I'm actually eating, on a regular basis. I'm actually able to hold down food. And it's amazing what starts to happen when you do get that nutrition and biochemistry back in play. Because a lot of times, like you said with the cancer diagnosis, I always tell people, I'm like, it's not just the physical, there's emotional added into it, right? There's something that you're holding on to, or there's anger, or there's, especially if you look at Eastern medicine, they talk about anger being correlated with cancer. But when we look at pain, there's a lot of really unique things that are out there now that are becoming more mainstream, and CBD is one of them. So I want to talk about PRōZE here in a second. But talk about how you went from the supplementation side into that CBD market, what CBD is for the listeners that are out there, and then what are some of the misconceptions around CBD? Because a lot of times some people I'm from the Bible Belt, right? And a lot of people in the Bible Belt are, oh, man, that's weed, just stay away from it. But if you really look at the cannabinoid receptors, it's super important when we look at inflammation, when we look at pain, when we look at recovery. And then also when you look at focus, because there can be different types of, CBD that you're taking or different things that you're using. So talk a little bit about how PRōZE came to life, and then, what CBD is and some of the misconceptions and what it can actually be used for.
Yeah, perfect. So, at the very end of the day, ingredients are vehicles to drive the philosophy that then determines the benefit. Okay, right? So I spend 80% of my time focused on the philosophy. Okay, right? What do I believe is causing whatever issue, the symptom? Okay, right? And then also, what is my philosophy, right? What do I believe in how to do? Okay, right? And then what you do is you find the right ingredients to be able to drive that philosophy. Okay, right? And so ingredients, whether it's vitamin C or whether it's CBD or whether it's whatever, they're just mere vehicles. Okay, right? And so how I got into CBD was not through CBD. I got into CBD because of hemp oil. So I believe, and this is a lot in Eastern philosophies of medicine or health, is the use of essential oils.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's there's three elements of essential oils, okay, right? So oil, my dad is a food scientist. So my dad is a formulator of foods, okay, right? And so one of the things is that natural sources of ingredients, if you will, okay, right? Plants, foods and things like that, right? The most potent part of any plant is its oil. the most potent part of most things are its oil. Oil is almost, it's like the blood of the plant. Okay, right? So it has all of the nutrients, and it's in a very concentrated way. So, you talked earlier about, emotional situations of the body. Like, we are energetic beings.
Amen.
We are energetic beings. Okay, right? What we're actually consuming, as well as what we are exposing ourselves to, whether it's friends or food, is energy. It's not Dr. Sean Drake. It is the energy of Dr. Sean. That is what I am exposing myself to. I'm not eating a carrot. I'm eating the energy of the carrot. And these nutrients have energies. Well, it just so happens that the oil of foods, plants, spices, things are very energetic. They have a lot of frequencies. So there's an element of that energy there. And then the second thing, like I said earlier, is there's a lot of potency of nutrients, concentration of nutrients. So therefore, I like using essential oils or things that are very dense in the oils for my formulations. Okay, right?
Yep.
So hemp oil happens to be a very, very powerful oil, okay, from the hemp plant. And for the longest time, we weren't able to use hemp oil because of the laws that were passed down due to the whole, marijuana.
Yeah.
And marijuana being hemp was tied together with marijuana. So when there was the drug war and say no to drugs and all that sort of stuff, so marijuana was definitely something that was going to be a class 1 scheduled drug, all that, right? Well, hemp got tied into that as well too, because it's from the same family of plants.
Which is super sad, because if you actually look at like the history of that, our clothes, all the things that were made with hemp, in a way more natural
The
environment.
Declaration of Independence
Yeah.
is made, okay, right?
Yeah.
Hemp was so widely used. And there's a narrative that it was so widely used that it had to be outlawed because of the fact that, you were building cars with it. The fiberglass was hemp. You were building concrete blocks with it because it's a bioaccumulator, so it would suck up heat. There was so much use of hemp that it was hurting other industries, okay, right? Such
Gotta
as
love
fuel.
lobbyists.
Exactly. And so therefore, you had no ability to all of a sudden use this amazing, wonderful plant for this particular process or reasons. And so then all of a sudden, wow, hemp became available to use. And as it became available to use, they started picking out ingredients in hemp. And one of the ingredients that happened to be very powerful was CBD. Because that's the thing, is when you're starting to do research with plants, no one likes to do research with the plant itself. No one wants to do a research on orange juice.
Yeah.
They want to do research on vitamin C because vitamin C is individualized. They can control it. They can do all that sort of stuff. But then also do remember, the most research that's done on things like this is the pharmaceutical industry. So they want to be able to take that vitamin C, change it up just a little bit, and then call it a drug and then start selling it, because they can't make enough money selling oranges, if you will. Okay,
Yeah.
right? And so that was the same thing with CBD, is that, okay, I think it's Pfizer actually who owns the patent on CBD. It's not, they're not acting on it because there's just so much momentum around hemp and CBD that they can't do anything. But literally, they've got the patents on it.
Oh wow, I had no
Okay.
idea.
And so that's how I got associated with saying, okay, let's start using hemp oil, which is a powerful adaptogenic herb. And
Can you explain adaptogenic herb? Because a lot of people, like I talk about adaptogens all the time. And I think that these are really, really important to the human body, especially in performance. Can you just talk a little bit about what that means?
Yeah. So adapt. So what you remember, you talked about efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
So the body inherently wants to be very, very, very efficient. And the reason for that is because the body only wants to do two things. The body wants to procreate and it wants to live. The 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 very core principle of living is being very efficient. Because if you used up the same amount of calories as you did when you first did something, you would be constantly consuming a huge amount of calories, right? So therefore, the body, as I always say, is the most well-trained machine. When you train it to do it, when you train the body to do something once, the second time that it does it with less energy. And then it does it less energy. And the reason why is because of the fact that if it expended the same amount of energy to do the first golf swing all the time, you would be constantly out of energy, right? So therefore, efficiency is the very core of living, okay, right? So the thing is that when we start talking about efficiency and we start talking about, sorry, I just lost my...
Adaptogens, talking about like adapting, yeah.
So think about adapt. Your body needs to adapt to its environment. Because if it doesn't adapt to its environment, then it's using a tremendous amount of effort every time it does or it's being exposed to one thing or another, right? So what you want, the healthiest body is the one that has the ability to adapt to things the fastest. Okay, right?
Yeah.
So adaptogens are a blend of or a set of nutrients that have shown to allow the body to adapt and to manage the stresses that are around them. And when you now are able to do that, you are able to become more efficient. And when you adapt to something, you now have the ability to become more resilient.
That's my favorite word right now. Resilience.
Resilience is critical. If you are not resilient to the stress that you are placing on yourself, whether it is physical or emotional or whatever, you are unable to become stronger. Without resiliency, you cannot enhance whatever your health is. So therefore, you can't get stronger. So you're constantly looking for ways to, number one, be able to adapt to your environment. And then once you create a high level of adaptation, you now embark on the ability to become resilient. And as you now continue to do whatever you're doing, you can now actually take the steps to become stronger. And so that's what, from a nutrient standpoint, is these blend of nutrients is that they're saying, okay, so for example, with hemp oil is an adaptogenic herb that allows specifically two areas, your immune system, so your inflammatory system, and your central nervous system, so your nervous system, to adapt and to manage the stress that you're placing on it. So therefore, you're not creating an overstimulation of whatever, an over-inflammatory response, because all of a sudden you are exposed to some sort of pathogen or virus or bacteria or stress or whatever it is. So it's not an over-exaggeration, because that creates a problem. And then more importantly, it's not an under-exaggeration if all of a sudden you're exposed to something. So that's why you're constantly using these sort of things. You know, it's helping you to do something that innately your body's doing, because we know this, because your body comes with an innate immune system, for example,
Absolutely.
and then you've got an adaptive immune system, right? And so how quickly are you going to adapt to those sort of things?
Very cool. And I think that, you talk a lot about ingredients, right? And they're the drivers. And I love that you use that analogy, because I always say that as well. Is like, whatever we're doing, we're driving into the nervous system, we're driving into your epigenetics, we're trying to make sure that your cells can express what they need to sell through your DNA. When you looked at PRōZE, because obviously you have the CBD side, but when you started to really teach me, I thought it was unique how you picked certain ingredients to be inside the product, so that way it drove better and it helped you adapt quicker. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, so like I was saying earlier, is that first you have to start with a philosophy. So with PRōZE, I said, the first thing I said is I'm going to develop a set of products. So now you have to question yourself, like, well, what types of products are you going to develop? You could develop all sorts of products. You could develop a weight loss product. You could do a bone and joint product. You could develop a lot of products that have certain benefits. Where we started was, I said, okay, I would like to develop products that focus on those areas that if you were to enhance and elevate, that it would increase someone's performance in life. It doesn't have to matter whether you're on the field or off the field, performance, okay, right? And then secondly, which was a major thing for us, was, you know what? There were a lot of things that there was a lot of medications and drugs that individuals were taking. And my co-founder is a sports medicine orthopedic surgeon from Steadman Hawkins, founder of, anyways. And so he was in the field of pharmacogenetics and also polypharmacy. And polypharmacy is when individuals are taking more than 3 medications on a consistent basis.
Which is the majority of Americans right now.
Exactly. And so he was digging into that, and he was looking at how does someone get to 3 or more medications? How they get to 3 or more medications is they start chasing the side effects of the medication. So let me give an example. So he's a sports medicine orthopedic surgeon. So one of the things that he is prescribing, or was prescribing a lot, is painkillers, opioids, right? And so you've got an individual who just had surgery. He's got a lot of pain. So here you go. Let's give you a pain medication, a pain relief medication. One of the elements of a pain medication is that it doesn't allow you it hinders your sleep. It hurts your sleep cycles. It hurts your ability to get into that deep state of rest and relaxation that allows for sleep. So now an individual is taking these pain medications, but they're not sleeping very well. And so then they ask the doctor, they say, I'm not sleeping very well. And so then the doctor says, okay, listen, let me give you a sleep medication.
Yeah.
So you take something like an Ambien or whatever, okay, right? Now that's a sedative. So if you define sleep as closing your eyes and not moving, awesome, you picked the right medication. But the problem is that's really not sleep. Sleep is defined by your sleep cycles. It's defined by how many cycles that you have. It's defined by how long that you spend in certain cycles and such. So with a sedative, you're not going to get any of that happening. So then you start waking up groggy and tired. And one of the things about waking up tired and groggy and being lethargic through the day is you can't accomplish a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can't accomplish a lot, you don't feel a high level of sense of purpose. And when you don't feel a high level sense of purpose, all of a sudden you don't feel very good about yourself.
Yeah.
And so now you get depressed. And so now you tell your doctor, I'm feeling depressed. And so then the doctor gives you an anti. And so see, you're essentially chasing the side effects of the first medication, and then the second medication, the third medication, right? And so we said to ourselves, we said, well, I believe that there is a scale of 1 to 10 that individuals are on when they have pain, when they have, sleep issues, I don't fool myself into thinking that I could create something that if an individual is an 8, 9, or 10, that I could relieve just through nutrition and nutrients. It's very difficult to do that, okay, right? But here's the deal. Sorry, back up a second. One of the things that people don't realize, those individuals that were polypharmacy, pharmac, if you will, you would think that they were the 8, 9, or 10. And they're actually not. They're the 1 to 7. They're the ones that were feeling some pain, but it wasn't a ton of pain, but they didn't have another, option outside of a pain medication.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden you have a lot of 1 to 7s that are dealing with a lot of the excess, which is the side effects, which is causing them to take more than one medication. So we said to ourselves, well, do you think that we could create something in which we could help the 1 to 7s? And maybe the 8, 9, or 10s, we could create something that they could take less of the medication? I felt really strong that we could if we worked the right philosophy. So that was the first thing, bud, is we decided we wanted to create a products for pain relief, muscle recovery, muscle resilience, if you will. Another product that helped people with healthy sleep, another product with immunity and excess inflammation, another product for focus and clarity and concentration, and then another one for emotional balance. But if you looked at each of those things, there's a medication underneath it.
Yeah.
Okay, right? And so that was the first step. And then the second step was, okay, what is going to be our philosophy? So I'll just give you one, is that let's look at the sleep one, is that you can't force your body into sleep. You can't sedate your body into sleep. But what would actually stop you from being able to go into this highly metabolic activity called sleep? It's the fact that you are not in a deep state of rest and relaxation. What is causing that? We feel are three things. Number one, it is the fact that you have a high degree of inflammation, but not any type of inflammation. It's the inflammation due to the fact that you will consume a lot of sugars and carbohydrates at nighttime, which will then spike your insulin, which then later spikes your cortisol, which is the hormone that actually keeps you awake. So you've got that issue. The second issue, you've got a nervous system issue.
Mm-hmm.
Your nervous system is absolutely on fire because you live this, sympathetic fight or flight, 911 emergency lifestyle, and you want it to shut off at 9:30 or 10 at night. And the system doesn't do that. It goes from parasympathetic to sympathetic very quickly, but it doesn't go from sympathetic to parasympathetic very quickly. So you've got this nervous system issue. And then the third thing that people don't recognize is that you have to have a certain concentration of the sleep signals from your brain to tell your body that it's time for sleep. We believe that those are the root issues that don't allow you to get into a state of deep rest and relaxation that you could take two ways. You could take it into a meditative state, or you could take it into a sleep state. You get to choose that. And so therefore, we then found ingredients to then support those three issues. That's why you see cinnamon and cinnamon bark oil for your blood sugar. That's why you see basil and bergamot and magnesium for your nervous system. That's why you see valerian and GABA and a little bit of melatonin for your brain signals. These ingredients, a lot of people would say, well, I've never seen this in a sleep product. Well, it's because we're not a sleep product. Mm-hmm. We're a product that's trying to get your body into a deep state of rest and relaxation, looking at these root issues, which then you can take to sleep. See, that's the type of things that we kind of worked on. And the great thing about what CBD allowed, or hemp oil allowed, is that it had a very powerful profile of nutrients, adaptogens, the CBD and other cannabinoids. People don't recognize that oils have a set of terpenes and sesquiterpenes. Yeah. Often, hey, listen, a lot of people say it ain't the cannabinoids. It's actually the terpenes. The cannabinoids and CBD is merely just a canvas, but the terpenes is what's actually painting the picture.
Got it.
Because if you think about it, buddy, like you were solving these same issues before hemp oil, mm-hmm. and you were doing it with other essential oils. Well, what were those essential oils have in common with this? Because, hey, listen, they don't clove, rosemary, helichrysum, copaiba, all these turmeric oil. They don't have any cannabinoids, but what they do have is they do have terpenes. Yeah. They do have sesquiterpenes. And so is it the cannabinoids? But it's a combination of both of this. But let's remember that. And see, that's when we formulated the PRōZE products. I looked at, yes, the cannabinoids, but I was looking at these terpene profiles. Mm-hmm. I was trying to say, okay, how could I pair up hemp oil with other oils that could complement their terpene profile so I could enhance the benefit that they were getting? That's why you'll notice, buddy, like a lot of people take a look at it and say, wait a second, I was taking a product that had 1,000 milligrams of CBD, and how come yours only has 280 and it's doing all this? It wasn't the CBD. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just the CBD. If it was, now that the price of CBD has gone from $10,000 a kilo to $1,000 a kilo, you just load up your product with a bunch of CBD and solve the world's issues, or solve the issues. But that's not happening, is it?
Yeah, no, it's not. And I think it goes down to when you look at the, PRōZE or other things, and especially with Athlete Empowered and what we do, it's the same thing. It's like when we're treating the human body, it's not just the adjustment, it's not just the soft tissue, right? It's the pulse electromagnetic frequency that we use, or direct current, or cold exposure, or heat, or infrared. So it really comes down to that same philosophy. And when, we've worked together obviously for a few years now in sport and performance. And what's great is that, like, I get to be the body, mind, nervous system guy, and then you get to be the nutrition, body, mind, nervous system guy. And so a lot of our athletes get to benefit from that, and a lot of our clients do. As you see your development of where you're going, right? Because you're always innovative and on top of new things. What are some of the things that you see coming up for athletes that should be at the, like, right in their forefront? What should they be looking for? What should they be trying to do?
Yeah, I think that, one of the things that I am really focused a lot on is how do you create, obviously, less stress on the system? Because less stress on the system allows for greater bandwidth to then focus on repair and recovery, right? Because at the very end of the day, this, right? It's more pronounced in athletes, but it should be all of us.
Absolutely.
Is really, there's two things that you should focus on. You should focus on how can you have the best recovery, and how can you create the best environment for the highest level of cognitive performance. It's really recovery and everything else takes care of itself. Everybody, you search for energy, but energy comes from recovery. You can't, just like I said, you can't force your body into sleep. You can't force your body into energy. And, me giving you a energy type product is basically me putting your finger into a light socket and you just feeling a tremendous amount of energy for a period of time, but then your body then goes back to where it was before, which was an unrecovered state. That is why the conversation of sleep has gotten so big finally, and things like that, right? Is that the essence of energy is recovery. And so that's the two things that you're always kind of thinking about. And then you start to say, well, what are the areas that are causing the body the most stress? From a physiological standpoint, you've got digestive issues, and then you also have a detoxification thing. You've got your liver, your kidneys, your spleen are incredible detoxifying organs. You don't need to do a detox, okay, right? All of these things that are out there, people are doing crazy detox, drink detox. This is it. Your body doesn't need detoxification. Okay, right? The body has the ability to detoxify. What you have to do is you have to take away some of those obstacles that's causing the system not to be able to run more efficiently.
So we have dysregulation and disease.
Completely.
And when you have that, a lot of times, like, athletes will ask me, they're like, I'm doing all these things. And I'm like, okay, well, bring me in what you're doing. And it's like, it's working in the opposite direction. And, it's why I've dove so heavy into breath work and a couple other, different philosophies around that. Is because if you can teach the body how to be safe and how to actually know that you can adapt to your environment, you're not going to have that red line all the time. And so with these products and other products that you have, and with nutritional counseling, you can actually teach the body, hey, we don't have to redline. We can stay in that green to yellow. And then, we're going to push the red every once in a while. But how quickly can you get back to green?
And see, that's the thing. How quickly can you get back to green? That's what you should be focusing on. You shouldn't be focusing on, that's what I'm saying. It's all about the recovery. Like, the environment is going to push you to red. And I'm not saying that red is bad. What I am saying is that you not being able to get to green after the red has stopped, that's going to be your problem.
Absolutely.
Okay, right? And see, and I think that one of the things that people do too, and they especially do this with supplementation, is just like we're chasing medications, we chase supplements.
Mhm.
We also chase, like you were saying earlier, about biohacking tools. You know what I mean, right? If it's this tool and that tool and this tool and that tool, like I always say this, like I always say it about reading too. You're better off reading one book a year and implementing it the whole year than reading 12 books. But the reason why we like reading 12 books is because it feeds our ego and it distracts us from actually implementing anything.
Wow.
So, hey, like you said earlier, fine. If you can't do a lot of things, can you just hydrate? And then after you figured out hydration, why don't you get some more fiber in your diet? And then after you figured out hydration and getting more fiber in the diet, then why don't you figure out how to eat more protein? And then after and just do those things, because if all of a sudden you just hydrate a little bit, hydrate some do some fiber, maybe some protein, whatever, you're not getting the best out of any of those things anyways. Now, I'm not saying that you're not in a better spot than where you were before, but if you're looking to just be in a better spot than the way that you were before, that's fine. But if you're looking to actually progress, if you're actually looking to get to a point at some point where you're doing a lot of things really well, then you've got to start doing one thing really, really well.
Man, that's so profound. And I think that everybody that is going to be listening to our podcast, or is following you or I, they want that, right? They want that progress. They want to actually, and not only that, but have accountability in a community that supports that. Because so often, we're being told to do all these different things and try this. And, you look at one thing on Instagram, and next thing you know, you have 20 products being pitched to you. And it's really confusing. So I love that approach and that philosophy.
Do you know why it is? I'll tell you why it is. And I get it. Is that we don't realize, we realize in different ways, but like, this happens with, let's talk about weight loss.
Mm-hmm.
We always beat on the individuals that want weight loss so quickly. They want to do it in 30 days. They want to do it in a week. They want to do it. And we say, they have that saying like, hey, it didn't take you this long to gain the weight. How do you think that it's going to take you, a tenth of a time to lose the weight? And so we have that in that joking kind of funny fashion, right? But here's the thing, is that if you really talk to an individual who is overweight and they are super vulnerable with you, what you will find is that they have suffered. They have suffered in such a degree that they so want the suffering to end. They're not stupid. They know that it's going to take them a long time to lose the weight. But doc, they have suffered for so long. They're just looking for an answer to end their suffering, not to end their weight loss, to end their suffering. That's why people want these quick fixes. Is that if you really dig in deep, it's because they've been dealing with whatever issue for just so long.
Yeah.
And see, that's what you have to first get your head around, is you have to say, yes, I know I have suffered. And I know that it's terrible. And I know that, but I'm okay with it. It's okay. It hasn't changed me. It hasn't made me any less of a person. And I don't care what anybody else thinks. Mm-hmm. And that is going to be the first step to the real journey, which is, hey, this is going to take a while. So are you going to get ready, number one, that it's going to take a while, and just make sure that you're enjoying the process of what you're doing. And see, that's why it's so important to start small, is because you can learn to enjoy something small than enjoying a bunch of different changes.
Absolutely. I think that, in chiropractic, we always talk about that there's no process that does not require time, right? And, often people are like, oh, I've been in pain for 6 months or 2 years or beyond, and I want to be fixed today. And, I tell them it's more complicated than that. So, I think to wrap up today's podcast is you put a lot of amazing nuggets out there, right? I think number one, simplify. Pick one thing, and then master the next thing, and then master the next thing. And then number two, that get to the common core of what your why is, and why you're doing this, instead of just saying, I'm going to do that, or what's this, or what's that. Get to your why, and if you can get to your why, you can pretty much accomplish anything. And then I think the third thing too is to understand that food is your medicine, and these different ingredients, there's a reason why they're there. And don't just go buy the cheap product off of Amazon, or off of an Instagram app. Really look at the company of what they're trying to accomplish. And I back your product 100%, and it's definitely made an impact in my life and a lot of our clients' lives. But as we move forward, we're gonna have Jeevers back on a podcast again, because I want to go deeper into the sport and philosophy of how we use these things. But they can follow you at Ask Jeevers, right?
Yep, Ask Jeevers is my Instagram.
Yeah.
I just love to teach. My Instagram is not any food stuff or whatever. It's just all about education. It's all about nutrition, wellness, health, that sort of
Highly
stuff.
recommend
Debunking things.
following his Instagram. Number two, PRōZE. You can follow them on Instagram.
Yeah.
And then Jeevers actually has a really cool newsletter that goes out weekly now, right?
Yeah,
weekly. And so we'll put that link in the bottom of this podcast so you guys can start following. And again, I absolutely love you. I love what you're doing. I love your mission. I love your vision, and your principles and purpose, because at the end of the day, you really care about people, and you want to put products out there that actually take care of them. And so I really thank you for that.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity, Doc. I mean, like I said earlier, I'm honored. I'm grateful to be on the podcast, sharing this energy with you. Like, we have a lot of the same philosophies. At the very end of the day, all we want to do is be with others that will, make our, ripple effect even bigger, so.
Awesome. Well, I know you're busy, so that's our podcast for today. I love you, bro.
Awesome.
Can't wait to see, how we continue to collaborate with people that are out there, and bringing you into our camp experiences and everything else. So thanks for being on.
Yeah, thank you, buddy.